bring up our executive producer, who is an Oscar-winning producer behind dozens of Hollywood and independent films over the past 40 years, including many from Barry Levinson and Alexander Payne and Steven Soderbergh. And of course, he's also behind some of the best television that we've seen during this golden age of TV, including Breaking Bad and Rectify and Better Call Saul. Please join me in welcoming Mark Johnson. And now I'm thrilled to bring up our cast. So happy to have them all here on this special night. In the role of Louis Dupont-Dulac, please welcome Jacob Anderson. In the role of Lestat de Liancourt, please welcome Sam Reid. And very happy to be joined by Claudia. Claudia, who we will be meeting in the next episodes, but we saw a little bit there in that trailer. Please welcome up Bailey Bass.
Just so you know, we were sat there watching you all like creeps.
In the dark.
In the dark.
All right, so I really love these episodes. I watched them a couple days ago, and I can't wait for the rest of the season and the rest of this universe to unfold. Mark, you've been tasked with a great deal of responsibility in this project. Anne Rice wrote 10 books in the Vampire Chronicles, and then I believe there was another series of 3. There's a lot there. There's a large narrative universe, and so with this current series, we've started at the beginning of the first book, I believe. But how did you approach this gargantuan task, you and the other filmmakers, in looking at this large universe, and how do you turn that into episodic television?
Well, all credit needs to be given to Roland Jones, who created this, and really it's his interpretation of Anne Rice. The original first season was going to go all the way through the first book, and then we realized we had way too much material. So we could be doing this for a while. I'm never tired of these people to my left. And yes, well, I have this wonderful job, I guess you'd call it, this wonderful situation where I am right now executive producing for AMC all of the Anne Rice, and we're just finding all the Anne Rice books, and we've found so much to do. We're going to continue in this world, the interview world, for some time, but we just wrapped a couple of weeks ago The Mayfair Witches with Alexandra Daddario, and so they're going to keep coming, and they will in some way or other tie together, but they're all distinct stories, but they're very much the voice of Anne Rice.
This question for Sam. Your Lestat is a fascinating character, and I think your portrayal of his contradictions and his emotional struggles are really interesting. He's a very lonely creature, and he seems to, he clearly really wants to create a connection, an unorthodox family connection with Louis. How are you able to approach this character in such a human way and make audiences feel sympathy, even though he's a monster?
Well, that's Anne Rice, I would say. Yeah, I just kept going back to the books. That's what she created, really, with her vampires. Mary Shelley as well with Frankenstein, where you go into the psychology of a monster, so you're seeing things from their point of view. And so you do have empathy for these, monsters, these creatures. And you know their backstories. I mean, we don't talk about it, in those 2 episodes. We do touch on it a little bit in this series, and obviously you see it much more in Louis' life, and you see how Louis holds on to the echoes of his humanity, which you can bring in to the monster, because you carry that history with you. Also, Lestat has had some pretty crap experiences, and all the people who loved him, or who he loved, have abandoned him. So I have a lot of empathy and love for Lestat. He is problematic. So yeah, I mean, I think Anne Rice really just created that character, and I just kept going back to the books, and Roland, did such an extraordinary job of translating it and bringing her work to life. And I just, always back to the books and looking for those scenes that you can translate.
And Bailey, I wanted to ask you, in these first two episodes, we don't really know what's in store for us with Claudia, but the images in that trailer are haunting, and so I'd love for you to give us a sense of what's in store for Claudia, and how that experience was of making this duo into a trio, as evidently happens.
Well, it was a dream playing Claudia. She's such a complex character, and that's why I think a lot of people connect with her, and that's why she's such a beloved character. I remember reading the script and just being like, wow, this is phenomenal. Roland wrote an incredible show, but more than that, his love for these characters you can really feel, and you can feel Anne Rice's love for these characters in the script as well, and in the show. She's 14 now, which really opens the door to her being stuck right when she's going through puberty. So she's always going to be stuck with these chemical imbalances and all these hormones, which then make her rage much more extreme, but then her happiness much more extreme. So every emotion that she goes through, I kind of made it little bits of euphoria. She's kind of never out of that gaze. And then the little moments that she is, it's very, very heartbreaking, and it kind of removes the veil of what she's really going through, which is trauma, being stuck in a little kid's body, but then wanting love. And we touch upon that a lot.
Mark, before we get to Jacob, I wanted to ask you about Louis. Because the character is very different than the Louis in the books, and I'm curious how you and Roland talked about that. Because of course, Louis de Pointelac was a slaveholder and a plantation owner in the original books. Now he's reconceived, as we saw, as a black man in New Orleans, who's nonetheless a second-class citizen. And so, I mean, this is really for both of you, but I think the power dynamics that come from, the racial history in America, kind of overlaid with trying to understand the relationships between these characters and the vampires and the undead is like kind of brilliantly complicated and a new way to think about identity. And so, Mark, can you talk about the reimagining that character? I'm sure that was a key first kind of early decision about this project.
Yes, I think it was. I think when Roland Jones came in and spoke to AMC, one of the first things he said was what he wanted to do with Louis. And I think Anne Rice is as brilliant as she is, as her books are. She wrote at a particular time in New Orleans that I don't think needs to be relevant to us right now. And so I don't feel like, I don't think we've in any way tampered with the spirit, the life of her book, but we've made it, in making it more relatable, I think we made it that much more, as I say, accessible, and we had no question at all the idea that Louis would be an African American, still nevertheless suffering the indignations of a black man at his time in New Orleans.
So Jacob, this character, for a huge fan base and for decades and thousands of pages, was imagined as a certain kind of character, and you came into it, and it was a very different kind of character. What was that? I'm sure that was some level of freedom to make this your own. But what did the baggage of the previous version of that character, how did that inform your process in thinking about how you would play this person?
Well, there is freedom, but there's also like fear. I mean, like I love Anne Rice's writing, and I love these books. I love this book. There are elements of it that I find uncomfortable sometimes, but it's the same Louis. Like, he's the same guy. It's the same story. It's just that the context is slightly different. And to your point about power, I think something that we do explore in the show, you see it in the second episode, but we continue to explore it, is that like Louis' vampirism doesn't buy him, it doesn't afford him power in a human context. Like his power as a vampire, and I think that's really sad as part of his despair, but also that Louis' 2 generations from essentially the Louis in the book who you know are kept slaves, and that's a big part of his shame. He has that in his family, and now he's a part of an industry that like is exploitative. I think that actually in some ways our Louis carries more shame about his human business than the Louis in the book. But I think he's the same guy. Really, you know, it's about grief and despair and sadness and questioning. He's like searching constantly.
Well, I think that some of those scenes, like going to the opera as a ballet and kind of the dynamics at the poker table, you know, I feel like that was very effective in creating empathy and creating depth for this character, because you know, I think to modernize, it's you know, those are not you know, those are not dynamics that we're used to seeing on screen, and so to see that and to, I think it gives us a greater understanding of kind of the depth of his sadness, to your point. I mean, was it uncomfortable to live that part of the character during those scenes? I mean, how was?
I live it every day, like, you know, I live a version of it every day, so no, no, but seriously, like, it's, yeah, I think that, yeah, I don't really know what to say beyond that, but I'm just glad that we're not, this isn't a colorblind Louis. We're dealing with it. We're thinking about it. It's a part of the exploration of this story, and a part of the history of the South as well, and the Gothic genre.
I'm sure all of you remember the last person to play this character was Brad Pitt.
And to clarify, I don't live in Jim Crow Southern era, so I don't need to like put those two things together. Well, I know what it's like to be a black man in certain spaces.
So Sam, from the beginnings of the vampire traditions in literature and in theater, there's often been a gay subtext, but for this adaptation, subtext becomes text.
Yeah, I would say it's not subtext. Really, because in Anne Rice it's pretty damn clear. So it's not subtext become text, it's just text is now being text. So yeah, and I think fucking yeah, it should be. You know, we're gonna do Anne Rice, we may as well do Anne Rice properly. Yeah.
I mean, again, I feel like it seems like the strategy of this adaptation, you know, in this area too, kind of lays bare and opens up the character to understand to understand Lestat and his sadness and his you know, the power dynamic of being other in that society, that being other extends in many different directions. And so I'm curious when you were first talking to Roland and Mark about the character, was that always a central part of being, being a Lestat that was kind of the best version of this modern retelling of this?
I need to try and work out what the question is. You're talking about his otherness,
Yes.
His vampireness. Yeah.
Well, his otherness as a vampire and as a person, a man without a country, a person who has come to the West to colonize, come to America to colonize for the vampires, and someone who is
Yeah.
gay, and there's all
Yeah.
sorts of angles that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, he's not there to colonize. He's there to go and sort of live out a human life. He's gone. He's I don't need to. I don't know if you want me to tell you the whole history from the book, but he's come from some pretty intense experiences where he's learned the history of vampires and things like that, and Lestat has come over to Europe to get away from the catechism of humanity and the way that's kind of slapped on top of the vampires, that you're gonna, that it's all about self-flagellation, Christianity, Catholicism, that we're monsters, and if as a monster you have to serve Christ by being a servant of the devil, and that's sort of like, what you're a monster, wake up and serve Christ, which is sort of what he's discovered in his past, and I think Lestat, that is garbage, and I'd much rather have a good time, and I'd much rather celebrate myself, because he didn't get a choice, he didn't get to choose to become a vampire, he was forced into it, and I think we commented it on the show that all vampires are born out of trauma. That's why people identify with them so well, because they are traumatic, painful beings, and often that's sexual trauma as well. But so he's come to New Orleans to get out of that, to start his own new life, really. So and I think his bisexuality, his pansexuality has always been a part of that character when he was human, as before he was a vampire, and I think that's something he's always embraced as well. It's also quite heavily embraced in the vampire world as well. So it's a nice space. that one. And then once you become a very powerful being, the mess of humanity, all of these rules and things, it don't matter. And I think that's what he's trying to say to Louis. It's like, hey, we're really above all of this. You don't need to worry about it. And it's a huge error on his part.
It's a big part of their tension.
Yeah.
It's like,
because he doesn't.
you can afford to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And Lestat doesn't understand that. He's got a long way to learn, and he learns from Louis, and that's why he loves Louis. Because he realizes that this is somebody who I need. To teach me things. Sorry, that was a bit of a tirade. I haven't slept. I literally got off a plane from Australia a day ago. Sorry.
Welcome.
You're doing great. You
Mark, I want to talk about another key change in the books. The interviewer in the books is referred to as the boy, and and this bringing in Eric Bogosian and having this second interview happen decades later. Clearly, it opens up the story. It gives us this new view of Louis in Dubai, in this new environment. Can you talk about why that was important, and what that, and I think we're all kind of curious. We've just seen 2 of these. We're curious about what happens in these upcoming episodes, but I can't just ask you to tell us that, because we're going to see it next week. But talk about the reimagining of the interviewer, because that's a big change.
It's interesting because in the movie, Christian Slater plays the interviewer in San Francisco. I think Roland, we talked about it, just the idea that that's been done in a strange way. I would argue that our show is closer to Anne Rice's book than the movie, which is ironic because Anne Rice, wrote the movie herself. But I think we're just able to explore new dimensions, make him that much more a character, much more a participant than the sort of young, naive Christian Slater character. And as you know, and will be explained as we see more than once, the scar on his neck. So it's really just an artistic choice that I think allows us to explore the interviewer much more, with much more depth.
Bailey, I have a question for you. I see that in addition to spending a good amount of time in this world, this vampire world, you've evidently been spending a lot of time in the world of Avatar. And I'm curious, these are two different, very imaginary, very unreal worlds that exist in a lot of depth in the minds of millions of people. And you're stepping into those imaginary worlds with a lot of boundaries that have already been set, or a lot of expectations have already been set. Can you talk about that as the challenge or the freedom that provides as an actress to be in these worlds that are unreal but set?
Well, I've been fortunate enough. I was cast to play Sadaya when I was 12, so I didn't really have much acting technique, but when I start to play Claudia, I've learned a lot since then, and I was cast when I was 18, and I had a lot more technique, and I've learned that I enjoy playing characters and doing all the deep and very difficult and challenging but fun work that it takes to play these characters that are so beloved by so many. And it's just more research. I read the books, I notated them like crazy. I had Google Doc after Google Doc after Google Doc. I spoke with Sam and Jacob about the characters as well and the dynamics that they have, and we worked with an incredible dialect coach. Along with that, we got to film in New Orleans, which was really helpful because we can step right outside of our homes or our hotel rooms and be in the environment that Anne Rice was when she wrote the books, and that was really, really special.
And Jake, one last question for you. I'm curious. We talked about the change in the interviewer character. We get to see you in New Orleans. We get to see you decades later, looking the same, but also looking like you feel a lot older. Can you talk about how you thought about that as an actor to play that character who's aged and he hasn't, in that challenge of these two parts of the story that you're carrying forward?
Yeah, I mean, it's the best thing in the world. It's like you get to play somebody over decades. Like I think a lot of it for me in the present day portion of the story was about what does Louis hold on to, like what does he carry with him, and how detached has he become? How much has he kind of given into that like vampiric attachment, and also how much of it is like a bit of the game. How much of that detachment is sort of to freak Daniel out, and yeah, it was just, I guess, like I'm terrible at like talking about process, but just like on a kind of day-to-day basis, it's just like, okay, what is there something here that I can grab that's like a fun little thing to put in here, or to like, is there something that I want to make sure that because of the memory, because of what he's describing, I have to completely like keep back from. But I also like the idea that like Louis constantly hypnotizing himself in this interview. Like he gets lost in his memory and he's kind of like shocked at his own realizations. That's like, that was, yeah. I just had a lot of fun. And a lot of it was just about like trying to freak Eric Bogosian out and like trying to hypnotize him. But yeah, that's like, Louis having you'll see as this season goes on, that he goes on a real ride in that interview. He goes on a real journey that he hasn't bargained for at all. And yeah, he misses his family and his humanity. So like just having a little moment to reflect on it, I think is kind of intoxicating. So just like making sure that is there, that you see that, you feel that. I told you I was terrible at talking about process.
That was good.
Like intellectualizing it in that way. Yeah. Can I also, I just want to shout out Kaylin Coleman over there, who plays Grace the Point of Life. You don't get that, you don't get the contrast as well. That's what I think I was very lucky to have that family, to have the deployment lux, because that shows you, you know, and they're amazing. I love Katie.
I want to be respectful of how long a day all of you have had, and I also want, if I had a Q&A prize for the group of you. We've got a lot of Q&As at this theater, but everybody else who've been up here and been grilled with questions, the audience for all of those other people got to see the whole work. For you guys, you're talking about something that we've only seen about a quarter of.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciate the ways in which you guys talk about this, given that we don't really know what's coming. And I think we're all very excited by what we've seen and the way you're talking about the rest of the season. We're excited for what's left, and I hope we can bring you back for the start of a season 2 for another event. I hope that's in the cards. So I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to let you guys know that this Sunday, October 2nd, let your friends know that these 2 episodes will be on AMC Plus, and if you want to see episode 3, I believe that'll be on AMC Plus on October 9th, if I got my math right. So I hope you'll join me in watching the rest of the season. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.